Good evening, my name is Kacper Paradowski and you're watching Poland Daily News. The first case of coronavirus in Poland was confirmed recently. According to the Ministry of Health, the patient who tested positive comes from the Lubuskie province and was most likely infected with the virus in Germany, where he attended a carnival. According to Minister of Health, Łukasz Szumowski, all the implemented procedures performed properly and there is no reason to panic. We have identified the first case of a patient diagnosed with coronavirus in Poland. As I promised earlier, I informed the Prime Minister and the President of Poland about it, and now I immediately pass this information on to you, the media and the public. The patient is in good condition, he is not at high risk. All persons who have had contact with the patient, although it is not a large group of people, are now quarantined.
This difficult time requires cooperation and responsibility from all of us. We should know how to act, and I hope that all of us will manage to overcome this disease in Poland. I encourage everyone to cooperate and to obey the rules passed on to us by the institutions entitled to do so.
We registered the first case of coronavirus in Poland. We want to exchange experiences. Cooperation on the forum of the European Union is important here. Therefore, we proposed a meeting between the ministers of health of these countries. Such a meeting will take place on Friday, and during the meeting, issues related to the supply of medicines and necessary equipment will be discussed. There is no real threat at the moment, but everything is prepared for that eventuality. I have just spoken with the Minister of Health. Appropriate procedures are being implemented as far as pharmacies are concerned. Pharmacies are being provided with information so that pharmacists know how to direct people that would come in with symptoms which could be caused by the coronavirus. Dr. Jacek Smykał, head of the Infectious Diseases Ward of the University Provincial Hospital in Zielona Góra, announced that the condition of the Polish patient infected with coronavirus has improved. The patient was transported to the hospital in a specially equipped ambulance. The course of this patient's illness is mild. It began with a fever and cough. However, today there is no more fever, a slight cough, and overall the patient feels much better. They will therefore stay in the ward. We will carry out control tests, and only if the results of these tests return negative will the patient be discharged. The patient's family remains under quarantine at home at the moment. We recommend not to come into contact with bus travel, as the patient arrived from Germany by bus. The Ministers of Interior and Administration of the Member States of the European Union met in Brussels to hold talks about the crisis on the Greek-Turkish border, where thousands of migrants are attempting to cross into EU territory. The European Union rejected the open-door policy and decided against accepting the migrants.
Hundreds of thousands of migrants are attempting to enter the European Union. The crisis at the Greek-Turkish border is a result of the decision made by the President of Turkey, who announced establishing a border between Greece and Bulgaria. The Greek border authorities are blocking the migrants.
Where is humanity? Don't they have a conscience? Don't they feel bad when they see the misery of these children and women? We are looking for a shelter in countries that protect human rights. We escaped war and we came here. And they are pointing guns to our heads? Where is humanity?
The Athens authorities have blocked the land and sea borders.
The Turkish side fabricates and spreads false information about Greece. Today they lied about us shooting migrants. I categorically deny this information.
The President of Turkey announced that he will not meet the Greek president to solve a potential humanitarian crisis. He also criticized the European Union, who was supposed to allocate €6 billion for the migrants living on Turkish territory.
Turkey doesn't need this money anymore. Migrants can choose the country they want to live in.
A special meeting of the Ministers of Interior and Administration of all EU countries will be held today evening. The situation on the Greek-Turkish border will be the main topic of the meeting.
Politics in Poland are seldom entangled with history, often regarding World War II and cooperation with the communist regime. Such is the case of Leszek Żukowski, a war hero and president of the World Union of Home Army Soldiers. As of late, chairman of the Historic Army Bureau, Professor Sławomir Cęckiewicz, accused him of cooperating with the communist regime. The war veteran filed a lawsuit alongside his attorney, a staunch critic of the current government, Roman Giertych.
The lawsuit filed by Professor Leszek Żukowski, president of the World Union of Home Army Soldiers, concerned the 2018 publication of an article by Professor Sławomir Cęckiewicz in Do Rzeczy Weekly. The historian quoted a fragment from a secret police registration card. Professor Cęckiewicz claims that from its beginning, the lawsuit is unfounded.
According to the claims made in the lawsuit by attorney Giertych, I accused Mr. President Żukowski on many occasions of being a communist agent. I wrote no such thing.
The counsel of the claimant is attorney Roman Giertych, who as of recent represents those connected to the current opposition in Poland. He is demanding an apology from Professor Cęckiewicz, as well as a compensation of 20,000 zlotych.
He wrote that the war hero, concentration camp inmate and soldier of the Home Army was a secret informant of the communist regime. He has no documentative proof of that, which means that he was lying, Your Honor.
At the request of the plaintiff's attorney, the testimony of Professor Leszek Żukowski was heard by the court. According to the lawyer, the trial is to end as soon as possible, bearing in mind the age and health of the accused. Żukowski denies any connections with the Communist Security Service. According to a statement made by the accused, the allegations against him put the whole World Union of Home Army Soldiers in a bad light. The subject matter is highly political. Today's hearing was focused around the certificate from the Institute for Remembrance, presented by the plaintiff. The defendant, however, plans to prove in the upcoming trials that such a certificate does not prove innocence. The trial was postponed until July 17, 2020.
Hans G., a German businessman whose operations were based in Poland, was accused of hate speech, discrimination based on nationality, as well as mobbing. The German national was said to insult his Polish employees, claimed to want to kill all Poles, and identified as being Nazi. One of his alleged victims recorded his speech and took the evidence to court. The case became the topic of national discussion and, after a few years, was concluded by criminal charges. However, in a separate lawsuit, the Civil Court of Appeals issued a verdict which states that the victim, Natalia Nitek, was fined 15,000 zloty and was made to publicly apologize to Hans G. for the unauthorized recording. Hans G. was also made to apologize in a private letter. Mr. Kacper Płażyński, the husband of the victim and Member of Parliament, is with us tonight, all the way from Gdańsk. Sir, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
What were your wife's reactions to the verdict?
Well, as all of us, I think, unbelievable, scandal. Well, the truth is that there was other case in the criminal court, and actually a few months ago there was also a ruling in that court, and it was sentencing Hans G. For prison time. Actually in suspense, but it was prison time. So the civil court took in defense actually criminal activity, saying that recording that kind of criminal activity is breach of his right to privacy. Well, I don't know how to comment it. I'm also attorney, and I didn't ever met that kind of case, that kind of unjust ruling.
Would you say that the nationality of the defendant mattered in this judgment?
I have no idea, but well, it mattered for the case because the offender is a German businessman making his business in Poland. And what he said to my wife and other employees was, for example, that he is a Nazi person, he loves Hitler, and he would like to shoot all the Poles, because Poles should be slaves, and that's all. So in that matters, yes, the background of his nationality is quite important between our national tense relations because of the Second World War, where Poland was a victim of German invasion.
Right. And now, what are your plans for the future with regards to this case?
Well, my wife is a very proud and very brave person. So, well, she'll do what she thinks is right in that case. She'll try her chances. Hopefully, it will be with a better result in the Supreme Court. And well, let's take one look earlier at the ruling of the first instance court. It was 180 degrees different than this ruling. So there is something unusual going on, I would say.
Mr. Płażyński, thank you very much.
Thank you very much also.
That is all for tonight. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for Poland Daily Business. Good night.
Hello and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. The forecast tonight will bring snowfall to the cities of Rzeszów, Lublin and Koszalin. The temperatures will be lower than they have been the last few days, and they will vary between -1 to 2 degrees. Tomorrow we can expect some fair weather throughout the country. We will see partly cloudy skies and temperatures of 6 to 11 degrees. The next 3 days will bring sleet to the northwest and overcast skies in the east on Friday. By Saturday, we will see overcast skies in the central and southern regions of the country, and by Sunday, we can expect the weather to get a bit better, with partly cloudy skies throughout the entire country. And that is all for now. I thank you for joining us, and I invite you to stay with us for Poland Daily Business.
Poland Daily Business. Tonight we will talk about Turkey and its policy and whether Turkey becomes the superpower in the region or quite reverse. Artur Wróblewski of Lazarski University is our guest, so welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
When you are looking at the multilateral policy of Turkey, it's a rapprochement with Russia, and what is happening right now in northern Syria. What do you make out of this?
We are far away now from rapprochement with Russia or détente in the region because Turkey, Erdogan, is very weak, and the whole mess is coming from his weakness. Why? First of all, he's weak because he's losing support, not only in general population in Turkey, but also among his own members. President Erdogan is losing its grip on power. Hundreds of people left his party, Development and Justice Party, and two people even close to him established new parties or joined new parties. So he's feeling like he's losing maybe this popularity, so he tries to increase his popularity by opening new fronts of combat, by fighting this war in Syria, but nobody really understands why he's in Syria and
Does
what
he want to
he's
annex
fighting
northern
for.
Syria? He attacks the government of Syria's forces.
To some extent, he would like to incorporate this northern part of Syria because it represents the Kurdish identity and Kurdish population. So he wants to control so-called Rojava or Kurdistan, Syrian Kurdistan, in order to control people who have been fighting against Turkey for many decades. But actually, Kurdish people in Turkey were fighting against him. But of course, this border is porous, so he assumes that maybe people in Rojava are hiding Kurdish rebels in Syria, and then they cross the border. But this is a big problem anyway for him. But he's fighting this war because he's weak. He wants to increase his popularity. Why he lost so much popularity in Turkey? Because he got involved in those conflicts in the Middle East, but economy is very weak. And actually the economy was affected very much by the war in the region and by the conflict with Russia and the Syrian government. And what is the worst thing for him, Turkey, Erdogan, is losing this battle near Idlib. And he supported even the former Al-Qaeda or Jabhat al-Nusra forces, which are now called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in order to fight against President of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. But unfortunately for Erdogan, Russians, who are great manipulators and great diplomats, are supporting Damascus and the government of Bashar al-Assad because Russia doesn't want Turkey to become stronger or an important player in this region. Why? Because Russia wants to be the most important regional superpower in that area. They don't want Turkey. That's why they are helping Bashar al-Assad to kill Turkish forces, and only last week, in only one day on Thursday, 36 Turkish troops, Turkish soldiers were killed. In February, generally, over 50 Turkish soldiers were killed. That's why 140 Turkish intellectuals and artists signed a petition addressing Erdogan to withdraw from Syria. It's not our war. We don't want our boys dying in the war, which is exotic, and we don't understand Turkish intellectual and artists why we are fighting in Syria. Do we want to incorporate Syria? Why are we there?
On the other hand, the NATO, the Syria's army, the Turkish army, is the second in numbers in NATO. It was long considered a pillar of this defensive alliance in the southeast of Europe. Yet we are witnessing as Turkey was kicked out of the F-35 program, as it wants to share the sensitive information with Russia, the purchase of S-400 Russian rockets that are supposed to be included to the Turkish air defense system, which cannot be done without of sharing some very sensitive information, really jeopardizes the safety of, for example, Poland.
Let's remember that Turkey was a very important part of this project called Joint Fight Striker.
And you are using the past term in a purpose.
Yes, F-35, because they were producing, if I remember correctly, around 437 parts and particles needed for the construction of this fifth generation superplane, American superplane. It was a joint project. So they were kicked out of this. They were trying to buy now a Patriot missile system, but United States refused to sell it. They were asking now for this system in order to respond to Russians and to Syrian forces, which are fighting very hard against Turkish soldiers and installations and outposts in Idlib province and in the area in general. So it looks like Erdogan is now compromised a little bit and isolated because he does not have any friends. Russians and President Putin is not anymore his friend and ally. Syrian president is not his friend. NATO is not anymore supporting this kind of game Erdogan is playing. And Erdogan is losing its own power base in Turkey due to very weak and very bad economy. So he's becoming increasingly isolated old man, and I would say that we see the end of President Erdogan. The next parliamentary election in Turkey will take place in 3.5 years. I believe that maybe he will not survive so long.
We will see. Turkey, very important country for the safety and for the economy of Europe also is...
And for NATO, because it's a big army, but let's remember that NATO is a community of democratic countries, and Turkey is not meeting anymore those democracy standards we consider as our standard in NATO.
Artur Wróblewski of Lazarski University. Sir, thank you very much for this insight. And that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Tomorrow we can expect partly cloudy skies throughout the entire country and fairly high temperatures for this time of year that will reach highs of 6 to 11 degrees. In Europe, we will see clear skies in Vienna, Zagreb and Bratislava, overcast skies in Stockholm, Moscow, Bucharest, Sofia, Paris and Lisbon. Scattered snowfall is expected in the city of Bern, and the rest of the continent will see partly cloudy skies. The warmest spot on the map will be Ankara at 17 degrees, while the coldest will be Oslo at 2 degrees. That is all for now. I thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.
Hello everybody, my name is Maria Kądzielska and welcome to Poland Daily Culture. In this series of programs, I'll be talking to one of the most recognizable Polish modern artists, Piotr Gonzaga Myszkowski. Piotrze, thank you for driving from Poznań to see us. How was the traffic?
Was no traffic.
No traffic?
No traffic.
At least that is good. But before we start the interview, let's see how actually his paintings look like. Piotrze, when you opened your gallery in Poznań, you gained a lot of attention because it was something different and you started to work just behind the glass doors so everyone could see what you're doing. Why is it so? And do you need the people, do you need their attention or the influence to work? Or maybe it changes you?
Like my friends in Spain, France, they have studios with the open windows and they're working. It was always was like this. In Poland, everyone is surprised. Oh, artist is open, he's working. It's not normal in Poland. And 20 years ago, I opened my gallery 2002 in Poznań, my atelier, first atelier. And I had huge, big windows, like in France. Huge, big windows, and people was seeing what I'm doing. Like when how I look like my day. It was beautiful, you know. I was working, people was passing the street. I love life, yeah. And
did you ever had a situation when someone wanted to enter and tell you, "Oh, it's amazing piece, I love it," or just you should do something different here, or I don't like it, or who are you?
Yes, this contact is I love the contact. Even the kids, you know, even the kids. My customer, like my youngest customer had like 9 years old. The boy took the mom to the gallery and said that this art is beautiful. He wants this picture, and Mama bought this picture. I like this style, yeah, and the contact with the people and the opinion with the people, yeah. But the best opinion, anyway, is from my team, yeah. My team. I had my team. My team is my wife, my daughter and son. Yeah. When I do something wrong or something, you know, they saying, "Oh, not like this, Papa." I'm a little bit angry of this, but myself I say, okay. After a few minutes, I say, "Oh, they had right." Yeah, that's my team. Yeah.
So you have a whole team. It's a family business. I would say.
That's my team. You know, yeah. Without them, I'm nothing. So.
That's interesting to say, because usually artists are such individualists. We know all bad stories about Picasso or
No, yeah, but yeah, he working with his kids as well, and in Nice, and he in his studio was his kids. His kids was drawing, he was painting. You know, Picasso maybe has bad opinion like a father, yeah, but I think he was alright, and he was alright, yeah, he was alright. I like him very much, so.
Okay, maybe he wasn't so bad, yes?
Well, no, yes.
We all love him as an artist. The question is, do we love him as a human
but he loved
being?
very much his kids.
Now when we discussed this, and we know already who are your masters, is Matisse, let's go to the question of Andrew Lewis. You wrote the intro to a Polish edition of his textbook about drawings. So the first question is, who actually Andrew Lewis was?
Anyway, like you said, one of my masters, yeah, like I love Matisse, I love Picasso, Salvador Dali, but it's Andrew Loomis as well. And the Polish company, this company translated American book 3-4 years ago, because in Poland we didn't have this kind of book. This is the book about the drawing the forms, and we in Poland was it things like this wasn't in Poland. Just we could learn from the English book, and the Zysk and Spółka, they translated this in Polish. This was very big present for Poland, I think, as well, because it's a very good book. And who was Andrew Loomis? Andrew Loomis was making for the commercials for very popular American newspapers, like a Cosmopolitan, Saturday Evening Standard, and so on. So he was a professor. He had a very big talent, and he didn't want to keep this talent for himself. And he wrote the book. And Zysk and Spółka asked me wrote the blurb for it, and I promoting this. And this guy, we talk about the positives. This guy is one of the most positive professors on the world. He's giving you faith. He gives you a freedom. He's saying that you can do everything what you want. And because some professors, when you're doing something, they taking no, you're not doing this good. You have to change it. He's not doing this. Yeah.
So Andrew Lewis is new in US as a father figure of drawing and father figure for many generations of artists.
Yes.
And he starts his book with lessons about anatomy.
Yes.
Do you think it's important for an artist to know?
Of course. I was a student as well, and I thought that I don't need anatomy. I need anatomy, and every artist need an anatomy, and
why
then
is it so? It's easier.
It's easier when I'm drawing the form of woman, or like I said to you before, when my wife came to gallery and said, "How you've done it?" I don't know how you've done it, because I know the bones. I know. Yes, and this is make you, when you know the anatomy, it's easier.
Would you recommend to everyone who starts drawing to learn the anatomy of a human body?
Yes.
That's very interesting. And what are the other rules which Andrew Loomis give?
He's giving you, for example, showing like not everyone. Yeah, this drawing, and they are very dynamic. He's open you. And now I'm happy, because when the students come into my gallery asking, could you help me with this? I said, okay, come on, you have this book, and this book will help you, yeah?
How would you put in words the fact what consists of a good artist?
You have to be open and honest, and because talent has everyone. Yeah, but you have to work. I'm working every day for many years, 10 hours a day, and just talent and work. Then you will be a master after years, because the worth for the artist very bad, yeah, our first 10 years.
Well, maybe it's a relief when you hear then after 10 years of being an artist, you actually can start living better. Well, maybe that's true. Work and talent, two things which Piotr Gonzaga-Mieszkowski recommends to everyone who would like to become a master in painting. So thank you for watching Poland Daily Culture.
Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In this series of episodes, we're looking at Poland's relations with its neighbours. And I'm joined in the studio to discuss Czech-Polish relations by Professor Krzysztof Jabłonka. Professor, in the previous episode, we heard how the newly formed Czechoslovakia, as it then was, took advantage of Poland fighting the Russians to acquire some territory which many considered should have been Polish territory. Of course, in 1938, Poland was able to reverse this situation. Could you say some words about that, please?
Polska utraciła sporne terytorium Zaolzia w 1920 roku.
Poland lost the disputed territory of Zaolzie in 1920 when the capital of Poland was in danger. We had to give the plebiscite up, and that is why this arbitrary land was accorded to Czechia. Poland couldn't forget it for a long time. In a situation when Czech Republic was at risk, the country was granting gradually more and more rights to the German minority, with an estimated 3 million. At the same time, they neglected the Polish minority in Zaolzie. That is when the Polish government proposed signing an agreement on granting Poles the same rights as the Germans had. On this basis, when Czechs betrayed by their Western allies were forced to give the territories inhabited by the Germans to Germany after the Munich Agreement in 1938, Poles demanded implementation of the agreement and, what is more, giving back the territories inhabited by their citizens. Czechs were hoping that the Soviet Union would help them deal with Poland's demands. Unfortunately, the Soviets didn't help them. Our minister enforced the ultimatum, and we finally recovered our lands. When Czechs found out that the Germans wanted to take these lands and exchange them for Gdańsk, they immediately gave them back to Poland. They even helped them fight the Germans, who had already started entering the Polish territory through the Oder River. In 1939, when Czechoslovakia was about to be destroyed, the Czech servicemen came up with a very interesting project, an alliance with Poland, in other words, a union embracing all the Slavs. It meant that Poland could use Czech's army and its military equipment to fight the Germans. If this agreement had been signed before the Munich Agreement, the Second World War would not have happened. Unfortunately, the then Prime Minister, who later became the President, Edvard Beneš, was against the agreement. Years later, it turned out that he was a Soviet agent. The Soviet Union and Stalin wanted war, not a federal state. That is why he was against the agreement. The Polish and the Czech side touched on the subject of the common alliance during World War II. General Sikorski was cooperating with the Czech government in exile. Together, they were trying to establish a federal state, but again, Beneš's activity got in their way. Our general lost his life because Czech's pilot lost control over the plane and crushed it into the Mediterranean Sea under mysterious circumstances. After this, no one talked about it ever again. Czechs thought that the Soviet Union would take their side and launched military actions as soon as the Second World War ended. With all the knowledge they possessed during the First World War, the Polish army attacked the Czech army and pushed them back to their border. The borders were redrawn exactly as ordered by Stalin. He wanted them to be redrawn exactly the way they were in 1938. There was a school built on a Polish-Czech borderline. They drew the border on its rooftop in order to follow Stalin's order. Polish-Czech relations were quite bad until 1968. That is why Poland took part in the invasion on Czechoslovakia.
I właściwie bardzo złe były kontakty z Czechami do 1968 roku i bez trudu zaowocowały udziałem Polski w agresji na Czechosłowację.
Professor, 1968, the Prague Spring, Soviet forces, including a Polish contingent, Warsaw Pact forces, are sent to Prague to put down the rebellion. And yet there was one spectacular protest against this in Poland. Could you say something about that?
No, tak jak w Czechach zaprotestował Jan Palach.
In Czechia, there was a man called Jan Palach who poured gasoline on himself and burned himself to death in order to show his protest, just like Buddhist monks did in Vietnam. In Poland, on the other hand, the resident of the city of Rzeszów and the former soldier of the Home Army, Ryszard Siwiec, came to Warsaw during the Harvest Fest, which was a happy celebration, and set himself on fire as well. He did it to show that he is against the Prague Spring, the Soviets' aggression. We have to emphasize the fact that Poles were trying not to be involved in the invasion. They didn't attack Zaolzie, they invaded the city of Hradec Králové. During their invasion there, Poles were trying to act like humans, not invaders. Some local patriots were trying to fight with them. They also blamed them for the invasion. But at the same time, Polish soldiers were trying to explain that they were not the invaders, the Soviet Pact was. During the Polish protests of 1970 that occurred in northern Poland, Czech decision-makers got in touch with Poles. I remember how we used to transfer tissue paper through a secret passage of former smugglers in the Tatra Mountains to Slovakia and printed books to Poland. The meetings of the decision-makers of both countries, including the president of Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel, were held in Highlanders' huts. They established the Polish-Czechoslovakian Confederation or organization. By establishing this Slavic alliance, they were trying to fight the aggressive Soviets. The Czechs were no longer Russophiles. Both nations, also Slovakians, wanted to join Western Europe because we felt just like the countries of the West. We were against the interference, dictatorship, and the destruction of our culture by the Soviets and the Russian language.
No i ogromnej presji kulturalnej, niszczenia naszej kultury wschodu sowieckiego z językiem rosyjskim.
That's all we've got time for on this edition. I'd like to thank my guest, Professor Krzysztof Jabłonka. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and do join us again as we delve into the annals of Polish history.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Poland Daily Travel. We're in the River Museum here on the edge of Tomasław Mazowiecki. This is the River Museum for the Police River. It's a unique installment, and it's about all things related to the River Police, which we're looking at today, and some of the towns and villages along it as it flows from the Jura Mountains. We're about half its distance along. It flows into the Vistula just beyond Warka, the small town of Warka. So in this particular museum, you can see behind me, there's a mill. So you can see an actual working mill, because this is very important, of course. The water mills, how else are you going to make grain if you don't have a water mill? So there's a great tradition of that. And the Police, of course, is one of the main rivers of Poland. It's not a big river, but it flows fairly well, fairly rapidly, and it's always got a lot of water in it, even in summer, which makes it very popular for kayaking. I think you can kayak for about 200 kilometers or so from Szczekocina, which is on the edge, right on the edge of the Holy Cross Mountains and Silesia. And you can go all the way to the Vistula, to the mouth of Vistula. Here in this museum, you can see a lot of different things. You've got a lot of, well, for example, this boat that's behind me right here is an example of a working boat. It's over 100 years old. It was sunk into the river. It was rescued sometime in the early 1990s and put here on display. And one of the few examples of an old working boat from an old working riverboat from Poland. And it's quite a big boat. You wouldn't think it would fit so well on a smaller river, but it was used. Over here we have a pagoda which was built and a series of them which were built for the you can say the poorest children to come here and enjoy the river. And it's very interesting to go inside there and see some of the old wooden boats and things like that and how they made them. Because of course iron boats like this were very rare, but the wooden boats, lots of them. And then there are lots of other things. There's vehicles from World War II, because the Germans were very heavily invested in this area, so there were a lot of German motorized vehicles and armaments. And also there's some, there's a boat that's used for bridging, that is putting pontoons out, and there's a couple of pontoons that they would have used for crossing the rivers during World War II, for example. So there are a lot of things to see. And even this right here is part of an iron bridge. It was built over the River Police, just across over there, and Tomasław Mazowiecki in summer of 1957. And it was used purely for military purposes and training purposes. So this is a very interesting area. Once again, Police River, one of the major tributaries and the major tributary from the west to the Vistula River. Most of them coming from the east, rivers like the Narew and others, the Bug. Okay, so I guess the thing now is to take a few pictures of the place, and we'll be back after the bumper. I have found a very interesting little building. This is a recreation of a toilet. That's right, a WC, a water closet, you name it, a place to do your ablutions and also answer the call of nature. It's from the Tsarist times. It's a small building, obviously, not needing to be very big. But you'll see in here a number of artifacts. There's the old phonograph, and you see some musical instruments. There's a harmonica with its, accordion with its box, and there are some balalakas, I believe they are. And if I'm correct in my memory, correct me if I'm wrong. And we see on the pictures of Alexandra here, and Tsar Nicholas here, just to really give you the period flavor, because of course they were in charge, and Poland was part of Poland was under Russian domination at that time, and of course, in the Russian Revolution, they ended and that ended. So we can move right along from this interesting little building, which was at Spalwa, where we're going later. It's on the Police River. And we've got this building. And this fellow in this uniform standing here is a guard, because this was a guardhouse at Spalwa next to the president's house during the interwar period. This was a period when Spalwa, because the L is a W in this case. That's an L with a slash through it, a particularly Polish letter. And this was a guardhouse during that interwar period. And we can see here, look at this fellow, it's a very interesting, interesting uniform on. And we see a picture, I believe that's a picture of the president in the early 1930s. There's, of course, a caricature of Piłsudski, Marshal Piłsudski, an old typewriter, an abacus, because that was the calculator of the time. And when I first was traveling to Central and Eastern Europe, you would see abacuses everywhere, in the shops even. People use them instead of cash registers. That was even in the 90s. So in Ukraine, I saw them even in the 2000s. Yeah, that's right. I don't know if they still have them there. But anyway, those are two nice buildings, just to give you a flavor of what Spawa is going to be like. And then we walk along here, we see the mill. And what's interesting about this mill is, as I was saying previously, that this was the way you used the power of the river to make food, to grind corn and grain, to use it for making bread, or flour, rather, to make flour. So, and over here we have, just follow me down here, if you would, if you'd bear with me. Here we have a collection of actual millstones. And I'm told, if you're an expert in water millstones, this is the place for you, because apparently this is the biggest collection of such stones in Poland. It seems funny, I mean, to even talk about this now, because of course who uses a water mill anymore? But once upon a time, this would have been absolutely essential to being civilized, to the making of flour, and to sustenance, to surviving, to eating, you know? So the river, as this shows us, and that's why this is here, to show that the river was absolutely an essential part, not only of travel, communication, small boats, but also of making food. These are all stones from water mills that no longer exist. They're rescued from the ruins of water mills. And here's the water mill itself. I've already been inside, of course, and it really is an amazing place. And perhaps we'll get a few more shots of that. We're here, maybe take you inside for a bit. We're here at the Police River Museum in beautiful Tomasław Mazowiecki, and next to the Blue Springs, which we'll also see a bit later. We're traveling on the Police River. This is Poland Daily Travel. We'll be back with more from this area.